Hi, and welcome to the 97th TiddlyWiki Hangout. I'm Jeremy Ruston, the original creator of TiddlyWiki, and I'm joined today by Jed and Matt. Jed, would you like to say hello, introduce yourself, and say where you're from?
Hi, I'm Jed. I am currently living in Paris. Previously, I lived in the southwestern United States. I've used TiddlyWiki for lots and lots of things. Started out with notes for my thesis research, and currently it is just the toy that I play with now when I have free time. So yeah, I'm Jed.
Jed, great that you could join us. Matt, hiya. How are you? Would you like to say hello, introduce yourself, and say where you're from?
Yes, so I'm Matt from Stockholm, Sweden. I'm a long-time Tiddly user, and I use TiddlyWiki for all kinds of things, not least to tinker around with TiddlyWiki itself, because it's a lot of fun. And I also run the blog, if you can call it the blog, twaddle.tiddlyspace.com. TiddlySpot, that is.
Oh,
Yes,
yes, you'd think there
that's
might be
me.
a problem with having all of these URLs that start
Mhm.
Tiddly. And thank you both very much for joining us. Very lucky to have you here. I appreciate both of you are particularly productive members of the group. Yeah, sometimes the speed with which you're spitting stuff out makes me panic. Gosh, I've got to work quicker to keep up with Jed and Matt. Anyway, now of course we're in the happy position where Jed and Matt are working rather directly together on the Federation stuff. So hopefully they're keeping pace with each other and encouraging each other to ever greater heights of performance. Um, so today's session, last week I spoke a lot under the heading of finishing TiddlyWiki 5, and we made lots of notes. For me, I would mostly like to hear what other people have to say and try and address issues that have fallen out of that discussion. But I do want to drive things towards the next stage, and the next stage for me is GitHub issues. So that is us clearly publishing how GitHub issues and the other collaboration places are intended to be used. And the second thing is making it so that we can have rapid updates to the content of tiddlywiki.com. And do you remember that the goal that I proposed last week was that there be a small group of people in the community who have the capability to press a button so that the latest updates to build and reposted. And what I'm hoping is that it would mean that when Matt is answering a question from a newbie on the group, we want to get to the point that the easiest way to do that is for Matt to update the documentation on tiddlywiki.com, get a link to it, and then reply with that link. And if we achieve that, if we make the process as simple as that, so that that's how Matt wants to work, then obviously we start to get to a place where positive feedback loops could start to make serious progress on the documentation. Because at the moment, time spent writing a careful reply on the Google groups by any of us is time that is not spent improving the documentation of TiddlyWiki. So that's where I'd like to get to, but I'd like to start with topics raised by you. And Matt raised a particular topic first, just before the call started, which I wrote down on the agenda wiki as long Tiddler discussion. And I realized that's actually unhelpful because it's not clear whether it's the discussion or the Tiddler. That's long. So let's say dealing with lengthy Tiddlers. So this discussion actually came out of a ticket that Matt had raised for a very specific feature, but in the process of articulating the feature that he was proposing, he started to express concerns, or to start to point out the concerns around around working with long tiddlers. So there's part of the background to that discussion is that for a long time now, TiddlyWiki has said that the tiddler philosophy is that we cut information up into the smallest semantic units, and then we weave them back in together into structures with tags, links, and other forms of structuring. So there's this idea of the smallest semantic units. And what we mean by that is the belief that information is more reusable if it is cut into small chunks. So those observations are about how to get the best out of TiddlyWiki. So how users should approach it in terms of thinking about what it's best at. But it's also a statement that's designed to be helpful for developers as well, because it's about understanding what we should optimize TiddlyWiki for. So we've got a belief that information cut into smaller chunks is more reusable. That's independent of TiddlyWiki. We think that that's the optimum way of using TiddlyWiki, not because TiddlyWiki wants you to use it that way, but because you got more chance of using the information you've recorded. But TiddlyWiki needs to be able to operate with long tiddlers. So part of the design is absolutely, you may have seen my test data where I have the whole of Alice in Wonderland in one tiddler. And those kinds of cases where we've got tens of thousands of words in a tiddler are very important. And to me, it's important that TiddlyWiki cope with book-length tiddlers. So I believe the most useful tiddlers are postcard length. But I think it's very important that we can cope with book-length tiddlers. So for me, this discussion ends up being about, are there holes, shortcomings in the support for longer tiddlers at the moment that we could improve? And are there any tools that we can provide to help people who have longer tiddlers to do useful things with them, given that a lot of the tools that we do provide are really oriented back to tying together small items of content. So the bit that has been discussed in the past is that the lack of anchor links bothers people. So what people would like is to, within a single tiddler, to have headings within that tiddler, to be able to click on a table of contents, for instance, at the top of the tiddler, that would jump straight to one of those headings within the tiddler. And that's a very plausible feature that in most, conceptually fairly easy to imagine adding to TiddlyWiki. But where we are at the moment with that is we don't have a plausible, actionable implementation or an approach for how to implement that. And that's because, well, I mean, the naive approaches, so people have created naive approaches to try and implement anchor links, but then those anchor links end up clashing with the existing mechanisms that we have for handling permalinks. So for me, that's the current sort of landscape. Matt, is that the kind of thing you were getting at?
Yes, that is one feature that I guess people request. Another that's the technical solution to that when you mention anchor links specifically. But another feature from an end user point would, for instance, also be able to reach the toolbar as you're reading the long tiddler. You don't really want to have to scroll up to the toolbar in order, for instance, to edit it or save it. And another point that I forgot just for the moment, it'll come up in a second. But yeah, let's start with that one if you have any thoughts on it.
I agree about accessing the tiddler toolbar, and of course it doesn't need a very long tiddler for that to be an issue. I do a lot of my tiddly work in Firefox, which implements sticky titles, which means that the title bar of each tiddler is always visible, even as they scroll through the body. But I recognize that's not an ideal solution because not everybody can use Firefox.
So that's one. Jed, I think your microphone is on and buzzing or something. Well, okay. So another thing is that if you're looking on a long tiddler and you're in the middle of the text reading somewhere and you want to edit something, not only do you have to scroll up or use the sticky feature, but it's also a matter that you don't find that specific point in the text.
It's how interesting that you mentioned that. That is one of the reasons that I find shorter tiddlers easy to deal with. So, one of the benefits of shorter tiddlers is that it's easier to edit the precise piece that you want. So it's very hard to square that property that comes from the tiddlers being small. Now we say, okay, I want the same property, but for large tiddlers. Quite tricky. I mean, we've got folding, which turns a long tiddler into a short tiddler. And you may have noticed that when you've got a tiddler expanded, there's this option for the fold bar to be at the left, so that the fold bar is always visible, even when you've scrolled down through the body of a tiddler. And it may be that that's the kind of trick that we have to use, because do you understand what I'm doing? I'm pointing out the logical impossibility of what you're asking for. You're saying, here's a feature that we understand that we get by virtue of the short lengths of tiddlers. Now I'd magically want that tiddler also for tiddlers that are long. So there's a kind of a little ambiguity there that gives my brain a little frisson when I try and think about that.
But I'm not sure I agree, actually, because okay, I guess the underlying question is, do people at all need long tiddlers? Well, I think that the answer is yes.
We've already answered it to say that they do. So
yes.
we think that people do need long tiddlers. Now you're starting to assemble things that don't work so well with long tiddlers.
That's right.
What I'm particularly concerned about is to the degree that those items are fixed by working with short tiddlers, then it seems to me that you're starting down the same journey that I've been down, that says, Jeremy, you've got a queue of people outside. They're saying they want to manage these things as one long monolithic document, but almost all of their problems stem from their desire to manage it as one long monolithic document. If you assume that they're asking for that with the best will in the world, but it may not actually be in their interest, then you get to where I am now, where we've engineered a solution that says actually break it up in small pieces. Then those problems that you are concerned about have disappeared. So we've solved lots of problems by moving to Monaco, and now you're saying, okay, let's solve the same problems but stay living in Paris. And the trouble is, the move to Monaco was rather pivotal in the way that we solved our problems, if you see what I mean.
But if I have a long Word document, a long one, and I wish to correct the spelling in the middle of it, I don't first have to chop it up into index cards. Why is that?
Because Word is a tool designed for working with long documents. Its whole thing.
Yeah.
Word is saying to people, change as little as possible. You can work with Word just how you always did with paper. It's fine. Don't worry. I'm fake paper. That's what Word is saying. So of course it's optimized for long documents. But Matt, at BT, I met people whose full-time job was essentially managing requests to change a 400-page Word document from about 12 different people. It was their full-time job. And the reason why that job exists is because they persisted in believing that the only outcome that would meet their needs was to have a single monolithic document. And the second they did, this poor person who had to then cope with literally receiving 18 modified copies, figuring out what to merge from where. And I'm telling you, the thing that solves that is having small tiddlers, is having shorter blocks of text that you merge. So there's, what you're asking for here is, I want to go swimming without getting wet. I would really love to go swimming, but I hate getting wet. Right, now fix that. And I'm kind of...
Yeah. Okay. So another question then, if we accept the view that you share, how do I know where to split the long document into tiddlers?
Well, I think that's back to what we touched on briefly in the thread earlier, that how you use TiddlyWiki depends upon what you're using it for. So in a simple example, a task list, I think hopefully we're all agreed now that it makes sense to manage each individual task as a separate tiddler. I mean, in that case, it's really clear. That makes much more sense than having all the tasks listed in one tiddler and having to figure out a way to refer to them, etc., etc. But I think as you move to more complicated cases, and often we'll all be working on kind of unique problems that nobody has ever encountered before, part of what you do with TiddlyWiki is to evolve the conventions that you're using to deal with data or the material that you're studying, working with. So part of what I want to be able to do with TiddlyWiki is, for instance, to explore, to discover what is the optimum chunking level for this data. Oh, we're going to slice it up one step further. Oh, that was wrong. I want to merge these tiddlers back together. So those operations need to be quick and easy. In the case of slicing, that's pretty good now. You select a tiddler, you press the slice button, you get back a tiddler that looks the same, has the same headings and content and so on, but with this property that when you need to, you can dive into the level of individual tiddlers. But it's possible to use that assembled document exactly as if it was a monolithic document, because it is. We've recreated the monolithic document by threading the parts together. And of course, inside the app, inside Word, I think they also split things up. They've got sections and pages and so on. I mean, all you see with these tools is a provision of lots of mechanisms for dividing big, long, complicated things up. It's our primary. Divide and conquer is our primary mechanism for coping with complexity.
And Matt, I think actually you kind of solved this problem. I think it was you using a lot of things. The tiddler fields, or whatever it was called, where you have your different sections and you click on a section and you're actually opening up that field from somewhere. I think that's what you're asking for. You just make small tiddlers, and then you have your long document be the listing of all of your tiddlers, but you can access each one using, I actually haven't looked at the mechanism you use, but I should, because it actually was really useful.
It's that is why I dabbled. What Jed is referring to is it's called viewfields.tiddlyspot.com. Viewfields, I think. Viewfields. But it's yes, that was an experiment that does deal with this issue.
Oh yeah, no, I love it.
It's a
But and I think so when I saw that experiment that you did, it's actually very similar to aspects of the text slicer work that
yes,
I did, but aimed at a different goal. And the thing is, the further kind of, in order to do things like text slicer successfully, I think we need to build quite small, granular bits of functionality that can be used in multiple ways. So text slicer has one particular way that it models documents with this combination of fields and, well, it's all in fields, but it's the list field and some other custom fields. And I think TiddlyWiki's, that's a great way to experiment, but what TiddlyWiki is really trying to be is a general purpose framework toolkit for experimenting with these different types of solutions. So I think the trade-offs that we're discussing here, I think they reflect fundamental trade-offs with how we store and organize information. I think TiddlyWiki's job is to reflect those trade-offs up to us so that we, as users of TiddlyWiki, can experiment with how we address those trade-offs, if you see what I mean, because they're not an implementation detail. The stuff about how long the material should be is about ease of reuse, ease of cognition, ease of understanding. It's not just a technical issue. I mean, in fact, there's very few technical issues. Not the technical issue, don't forget, with internal anchor links is nothing to do with tiddlers being long. It's to do with the fact that internal anchor links reuse a feature of the browser that we're already using. So it's a straightforward clash, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes, I agree.
Is there any, only sort of on topic but related to other things, is there any mechanism in a browser for scrolling to a section without using like the anchor links?
Well, there's a scroll into view API that will scroll a scrollable region. I mean, in fact, the interesting thing about scroll into view is it will do all of the necessary nested scrolling to bring a particular element into view. So that's not the hard part. The hard part is figuring out, and we already do that because we already move the scroll position to the top of tiddlers when we navigate. So that's already faking the behavior of clicking on an anchor link. The issue is how we interpret the information in the location hash, whether it's the name of a anchor link, whether it's the name of a tiddler. A particular problem that we have is that the content within a tiddler can be displayed in more than one place. Might be displayed in some search results as well as being in the main story river. Therefore, we can't just have users typing IDs, which are then directly passed to the ID attribute in HTML. Instead, we're going to have to do some kind of, well, we're going to have to avoid doing that. We can't, it's not very convenient for us to use the ID.
Sorry, that was something that I could have remembered.
But I think it's, I keep stating it as nobody's figured out how to do it. I really don't think it's necessarily that difficult a thing to do, to figure out, but it's a substantial redesign, and it looks like the kind of thing that's going to be difficult from a backwards compatibility perspective. So that's why it's not going to be as high on my list as people might want.
Yeah, well, I remember from setting the location at the top of the Tiddler River will scroll to by default came up when I was making the icon menus, and I do not remember any of the details, but I remember changing where the Tiddler top scrolled to was actually a required some sort of deep change in the code that I wasn't going to do. So.
Mario, hello. We've just been joined by Mario. I'm very pleased you could join us. I don't think Mario's been at the last couple of Hangouts. It's obviously these short notes.
Oops, I can't hear you. So, can you hear me?
Ah, yes, we can. Mario, hello, welcome. How are you? Would you like to introduce yourself, say where you're from, etc.?
Yeah, I'm Mario Pitsch from Austria, near Salzburg, contributing to TiddlyWiki Classic and TiddlyWiki 5. With a German translation mainly at the moment. So, hi.
Indeed, actually, you've been fairly quiet recently, I guess. Have you? Well, I don't know. Perhaps that's me that's actually been not paying attention to the group. But Mario, you've certainly been quiet in the sense of not being at the last couple of Hangouts. I'm very pleased to see you here. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
So we'd started to talk a little bit about one of the perennial discussion points for us, which is the pros and cons of different length tiddlers and the degree to which TiddlyWiki can or should be engineered to optimize for different length tiddlers. But I propose that we take Mario's arrival to switch, in fact, because I think we've probably got as far as we could go with the longer tiddlers discussion. Mario asked the others, but anything from you that you'd particularly like to see discussed?
No, not at the moment. So yeah, probably there should be some discussion about how we can automate building TiddlyWiki. So if we could install a group, because I have several requests for contributors to the German version, and I think it would be nice if I would be able to pull or to merge pull requests and also send or create a new German version. So I think this would be possible if we split for example the editions, if we split them out and create some, let's say, automatic continuous integration with Travis, which is very well supported by GitHub. So.
Okay, so I think you may have been covering some things that are beyond my immediate initial goal is to make it so that we can push through updates to TiddlyWiki.com much more rapidly, and particularly so that people other than myself can trigger them. I agree that Travis CI seems like the most appropriate way to do that. So before Christmas was doing some experimentation with Amazon Lambda, but it seems like that's just a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Travis CI is pretty much organized for this. Daniele did some work before Christmas on it. So the Travis CI part, I don't even think that's that hard. When I started looking through the READMEs, I realized there's a bit of stuff that I'll have to learn to be able to do that, but it's only a little bit. And so have you used Travis before, Mario?
No, not yet, but I think we could relatively easy split out the editions. So I would be able to create the repository, but what we need is something like an organization, and then we need something like a TiddlyWiki German or TiddlyWiki DE repository, which only contains the content, so the Tiddler content, and it needs some package info. Then you can say, okay, pull the German version, say npm install, so it will install TiddlyWiki, and then you say npm serve, so it will start the server, and then you can start editing the German version. So this is possible, I think, and it should be relatively easy. What we need to change then is the general build. So if you create the new version, then you only have to upload, or let's say make sure that all the languages are updated so that the version number is the right one.
Okay, so all that we're talking about are updates that don't affect the version number. So anything that affects an actual language translation plugin, the contents of a language translation plugin, will still go through the, Okay. And for me, the biggest implications are needing to move some of TiddlyWiki.5 repo to somewhere else. As you say, it needs to become a TiddlyWiki repo rather than the Germaline repo, because we already have an organization set up on GitHub for TiddlyWiki. The problem I then have is I really like the way that if anybody downloads the TiddlyWiki 5 repo, they've got everything they need in that one go. Splitting it so that in order to get TiddlyWiki 5, you need to download 2 repos makes my heart sink. I truly believe that the difference in complexity between having a single thing and a group of interconnected things is about 100 times, even if there's only 3 interconnected things. Because with a single thing, it's so much easier to manage. Have I got it? Yes or no. Is it intact? Yes or no. So, so that's what would like some help with. So one possibility is that a clue is what we do already, which is we just as of 5.1.11 we've started to make the documentation be a plugin. So what we could do is, as part of the release process, we'd take a snapshot of the current version of TiddlyWiki.com and snap it into that plugin. But the presence of that plugin in the TiddlyWiki 5 repo, so I'm talking about copying the text, would mean that we'd still maintain that self-contained aspect.
Yeah, the problem I see is that we can't handle the merge rights, or let's say the creation rights well, because if I want to merge something from a German contributor, I have to create a pull request, and you have to merge it. So what I want is that I change something, I create a pull request, Travis kicks in, checks if everything is all right, and does the whole distribution. So
automatically from the pull request with no further manual attention?
Would be a possibility because if the tests, if there are tests, and if the tests fail, it stops, and if the tests go through, then it pushes it.
But anybody can make a pull request, yeah?
Yeah, no. Yeah, they make a pull request against the repo, and I check it if it's right. And if I do the merge, then it should be automatically created.
Right. But the trigger for the automatic processing is you, not the submission. Yeah.
Or someone which has the right, for example, maybe Tobias. If I trust Tobias enough that he doesn't kill anything, so it would be possible to have several authors that have the right to create a new version. But at the beginning, it would be only me. Yeah? But I think it would be much easier if there are several people which are allowed to do something.
Yeah. So I was imagining that for these in the earlier finishing TiddlyWiki 5 discussion, one of the things we talked about before that we should do is have well-defined roles. So the role we're talking here is a TiddlyWiki.com editor, I think, and I think there'll be 2 or 3 of them.
I think with GitHub it's not possible to set rights for just the subdirectory.
Which subdirectory?
For example, the edition. So if I have write access to edition, ed.
So on editions, I think that we might want to move each edition to its own repo. And again, there's some ramifications for this. But part of the problem is that editions, a Node.js edition of TiddlyWiki, the most obvious way to distribute that is as a repo that I can clone. And that's the sort of standard approach. So there's something to be said for considering moving all of our editions to be standalone repos, which perhaps get packaged into plugins when we build the main TiddlyWiki.
But I think they are only switched out if someone is responsible for it. So I'm responsible, for example, for the German and the Austrian version, and maybe the Switzerland German, because there is no difference at the moment. So I would like to have write access to those. Yeah. But if there is nobody, for example, there will be someone for the French, then I think for the Chinese and so on. Yeah? But if there is nobody directly connected to it, then it should stay within the main repo at the very beginning. Yeah? And
I don't know. I mean, I've seen other projects that are very profligate, have created, well, say Atom, for instance, has a repo per plugin, I believe, and ends up with loads and loads of repos. So I do wonder, actually, whether it triggers our discussion about TiddlyWiki, that one's instinct is that one wants to have a small number of repos, but that actually, if the second we start talking about access control, which we just did, that starts to argue you into a corner of cutting things into the units that need access control. And yes, before you know it, you got everything in a separate repo. And I'm not against that, but it needs to be kind of thought through then how we distribute TiddlyWiki. Because I think take a snapshot of the repo, but maybe the distribution needs to be a collection of things.
Yeah, I think for someone who wants to contribute, I think it would be easy. So they have to use Git or GitHub in this case, and they say, okay, Git pull German TiddlyWiki. That's only the tiddlers. Yeah? Then they say npm install, and I get TiddlyWiki, or that they install TiddlyWiki into the repo, and then they say TiddlyWiki serve. And then they get the server version, and they can start to edit tiddlers. Yeah? Then they do a git add and git commit and git push to their own origin, and they create the pull request against the German edition. And if I say it's okay, then I merge it, and my merge automatically distributes to TiddlyWiki.com, because this would be possible. TiddlyWiki already uses GitHub pages, and every repo can have its own, let's say, a subdirectory or whatever. So it will be possible that I directly create TiddlyWiki.com languages and German.
Right, but I mean, all these repos can have a webhook triggering the build process, can't they?
Yes, right. Yeah, but yeah. They only trigger the build process for their own edition.
Well, no, I think we have to build the whole thing, really, probably. Do you think? Well, no, maybe I don't know.
I just have to create, let's say, a structure, and then for every repo it will be the same. Yeah?
Yes, I mean the trouble is we've also.
It's not about TiddlyWiki text. So the TiddlyWiki UI is still in the core.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And one of the issues here is that you're talking here about the language editions of TiddlyWiki. They're unusual because what they actually are is, I think they're not editions. I think they're translations of TiddlyWiki.com. But an edition was the closest. Well, an edition is a starter. But there's a starter.
Yes, but the German mentality is on, and the Austrian is different to TiddlyWiki.com. So I want to have a translation for many things, but not for everything. I got some very nice ideas from German contributors. They wanted to have, let's say, much more basic start.
Understood. So it makes, I mean, that makes obvious sense that the more detailed technical stuff, English is accessible for those people, more accessible for those people than the beginners. So I can kind of get that. But, and I'm not saying that what you're doing is wrong or not what we need. My point is that what you end up creating, a partially translated copy or a copy, a translation of a partial copy of TiddlyWiki.com into German, is not an edition. It's a translation of TiddlyWiki.com, and it should really be TiddlyWiki.com/de-de or what have you, instead of, as it is at the moment, presented as an edition. Because to me, what an edition is the URL that you'd say to somebody, here, there's a TiddlyWiki for tracking your family tree, for doing tasks, for studying the Bible, so for particular tasks. So this is probably one of the things that we should try and fix. Every time I look at the build process, I get frustrated again by it, because I do think we need a German edition and a French edition, as in we need a URL that you can point people to and say, here you go, there's the German, and in fact, we've got that at the moment, but it's the empty copy of the German edition that you do that with. Sort of so we do need to clear up the nomenclature a bit, and I guess I would like to start thinking about what you've done as being translations of TiddlyWiki.com, so that by presenting them as that, we'll encourage other people to produce more translations of the content.
Yeah. There is. I think I know the problem that I had with the German translation was just laziness. I didn't want to translate everything, because I just didn't want it. But there are several people that said, okay, I can translate this and that. So I'm interested in this feature, so I can do translation of the German of the English text into German. So I think after some while there will be everything will be translated. The problem will be to keep it up to date. But I think if it's only you and me which have to keep it up to date, it's too much work. But I have at least three other contributors at hand. They are not able at the moment to clone the core. But I think they won't have a problem cloning just the German version, because they know they don't break anything. It's just text. It's not important for the core. So if they send me pull requests and everything is wrong, it doesn't hurt anybody. So I'll fix it, and that's it. So I think the barrier will be much lower, and there will be more people which are doing this stuff, because I think we have 500 issues now, and the main problem is simply it's too much work. So I don't know, it's a full-time job for 2 or 3 Jeremys to fix some of the issues.
Did you watch the previous Hangout?
No, not yet.
Okay, because that's basically that's my introduction to this whole topic that I've raised, is that the problem that we face is that TiddlyWiki isn't finished, and the reason why it isn't finished is because only Jeremy is working on the core, and so we need to change that if we're going to get through things this year.
Yeah.
So the topics are things like lowering the barriers to contribution. So there are things I think that we need to do to make it easier for people to contribute.
And I think there have to be more people that have right access, for example, to the editions. Because, for example, there are several contributors, they use the highlight plugin, which is nice, but I don't like it. So I will never make a contribution to it. But there are several others that really like it, and they use it, and they make contributions. But as long as only you have the
Do you mean plugins, or do you mean editions having their own?
It's the highlight plugin and the edition.
Okay, I mean, I've different views about when we were talking about editions like the German edition or editions like the Resume edition. I'm quite happy for those to be in their own repos, so that the people working on them don't need to worry about the rest of the universe. They can just worry about that thing. But the plugins, I'm not so certain about. One of the big concerns we ended up discussing last time is about security, and how ultimately TiddlyWiki is inherently secure. Certain aspects of TiddlyWiki are inherently insecure, and the best protection against some of the worst risks is kind of trust. And partly that's about trusting who you give stuff to, but it's also about trusting the core. And that's what makes things difficult here, because the second, right now, I am at least theoretically responsible for everything on TiddlyWiki.com. Nothing can get onto TiddlyWiki.com without me approving it. And that sounds like, on the one hand, that is, as you say, an enormous burden, an enormous amount of work. But it means that the guarantee of safety that Jeremy offers is worth something. I've looked at everything that's on there. So the second we let that down, that doesn't happen. So that's why we've third-party plugins into the plugin library. What I'm now proposing is that we should stop trying to do that and instead make it easier for users to choose to add a third-party plugin library, such as Tobias's plugin library, and to extend the core so that when we do upgrades and updates, that it'll look in third-party libraries for the updates to the plugins that belong from that. And so that change was two drivers. One was we've had endless difficulties thinking of a model for a single repository that meets all the other needs. So that really took us towards having to use separate repos. But the trust thing made me think that a good starting point is to transfer the ability to make those trust decisions directly to end users. So rather than me deciding whether I trust Tobias's plugin submissions and we'll put them in the library, I'll have people deciding whether to trust Tobias's plugin library. And obviously we face an uphill struggle, I suspect, to make people understand the consequences of a mistake in this area, the potential consequences as ever with security. But that seems that we've preserved what would already be the situation if we met Tobias as a party and he said, "Here, drink this." There's got to be a degree of trust before you do that. And I think this is exactly what we're in. So the more I believe that people are sensible. You know, lots of people who would click on the wrong email and get their computer infected, they'd still not drink a dodgy-looking drink from a dodgy stranger who said, "Oh, drink this." So, you know, people have some kind of self-preservation, and we want to try to capitalize on their existing behaviors and instincts and make those behaviors and instincts useful in the new situation that we're putting people in. And so making it being like a social contract of I trust Tobias, therefore I'm going to add his plugin library to my swatch of plugin libraries. So jumping all the way back, I think that does rather ameliorate the pressure on moving the TiddlyWiki core plugins into separate repos, because then what the TiddlyWiki core plugins remain is those plugins that explicitly are owned by the group, by the team, instead of being owned in the usual way by individuals.
Yeah, as you said, so the core plugins can stay in the core, but still the additions that present the functionality, which is part of, let's say, the documentation, they should be outside. So that's someone which is really using, for example, the highlight plugin. They can make their own documentation, which is completely independent to the core, because it's just documentation. And this can be managed. And let's say other open source communities, they have something like trust, a contract of trust. So if someone creates a pull request, there have to be at least 2 or 3 looks good to me. So they have some comments, and there are 5 people which are responsible for the repo, and if 3 of them say, okay, that's okay to be merged, then it's merged. So this could be you, this could be, for example, me or someone else, or Tobias for the German version. So that if things are only merged if, let's say 2 or 3.
So I think here what you're talking about is mechanisms by which we can spread Jeremy's present role in the group, and Jeremy's present role is as the only person that can approve certain things. Yeah. And in fact, I think that's a really good point, and it's a maturity point for an open source project to be doing that stuff. But in fact, what I'm talking about here is more like steps on the way to get there. So my part of the discussion was particularly about documentation, because I think that's a special case that I think we all believe that the best way for the documentation to be worked on is not GitHub, because by working on the documentation in GitHub, we drive away half the people who could contribute. So, but for as long as we're still on GitHub, that's an imperfect solution. It means that for lots of documentation, people who want to update the documentation, they'll have to work with somebody who understands GitHub. So as soon as we've got federation or whatever is necessary in place, then I would drop that requirement in a heartbeat, the requirement that people who wish to change the documentation use GitHub to do it. And yeah, so then you're left with code as being the things to worry about, and as discussed above, I think a fairly natural solution is emerging there. The core repo is the core plus the plugins and other themes and so on that have been adopted by the core, and everything else lives in third-party libraries is where we are now, I think. And it's kind of is working reasonably well. I mean, I really love what Tobias gets from running his own plugin library. I mean, he got the thrill of doing it, of setting the thing up and being the first person to set it up. But he also gets that level of control that's really nice. He gets to decide, and in fact, the way the plugin library is written, and Tobias has now started thinking about this stuff, he's got lots of funky options for how it could behave and be different and better than the core one.
Yeah.
So, good. Okay, now, in order to get this stuff moving then, I think it might be helpful if you were able to jot something down, Mario.
Yeah.
There's at the moment I'm assembling all of our my notes from our discussions into the Hangout agenda wikis. I'm just going to share my screen. So, oops, and now I press the right. So the hangout-97.tiddlyspot.com agenda for the meeting that we're in right now. So I started a better TiddlyWiki.com tiddler. That chunk is talking about something completely different that we haven't talked about. That part is I just did a few minutes ago, and it does what we were just talking about. There's faster website updates, which I think I was expecting to plug in there, the specifics of Travis CI. So, Mario, because of the way that so what I was going to say is there's couple of choices. You could, at its easiest, you could throw me some notes that capture what we've discussed for me to put in the Hangout wiki. Drag and drop a tiddler or something.
Yeah.
We could do a ticket, but for everything else, I'm keeping the discussion in here first because I think we need to make sure that we understand more of the landscape of what needs to be done before we sit down and start turning them into tickets.
Yeah. Yeah, I can create, or I already have an organization installed for some testing, so I could set up a working prototype.
Oh, I can add you. I can add you to the TiddlyWiki organization, and you'd be welcome to start creating your test repos there. You might as well.
Yeah, this would be the best. So if I can create the repo there, then I would try to move the German edition there and set up Travis so that we can test a little bit, and then we can play through it and see how it works.
Okay. Okay, people are actually. Okay. My apologies. That's now done, Mario. You should get an invitation. We should just anything that you want to do other than creating test repos. Obviously, we should discuss. But I think just going ahead and doing that is a great way to get started. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, Jed and Matt are busy in the sidebar talking about Federation. So I think we should take that discussion out of the sidebar. And it looks like a happy conversation. Would you like to summarize for us, one of you?
Well, I guess I'm on microphone. So anyway, mostly what we are talking about right now is I have almost got the last pieces to a working Federation TiddlyWiki edition, where it would be the minimum possible, but you could just take this, plop it down on TiddlySpot, and be connected. All the use cases and everything are obviously going to have to come from multiple people because it's a connected thing. But we were talking about things like the documentation and how you could just take, essentially clone TiddlyWiki.com, write your documentation here, and then use the tools here for one person to pull it from another so that there could be actual collaborative wiki use. Well, each person has their own wiki to prevent the normal problems from this. And also using the same mechanism. Oh, yeah, go on.
Can I elaborate on that?
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that to make a clone, as Jed just said, of TiddlyWiki.com, the documentation.
Did we just Did I just lose him?
Are you okay?
Did we lose Matt? We might
Matt's
not have.
utterly frozen.
Oh,
And
Yeah, you're frozen.
okay. Well, anyway, I think what he was saying was that as part of the Twitteration idea, we wanted to make like topic communities, so that
Yes.
if you wanted to talk about gardening or whatever, the structure that me and Matt are working on for how the communication is going to work will lend itself very well to being able to, I mean, it's not tagging, but doing the equivalent of tagging a post or a wiki as being about gardening. And then we'd have, central servers that you could connect to, or not really servers, but central listings, I guess, you could connect to and say, I want to find things about gardening. And it would be able to hook you up so that you could pull information directly from the relevant wikis and follow them and things like that. And using that for making documentation pull requests where, as a group, the community could do whatever they want on their own wiki and then send a request to one of these central sites. And then that central site could collate all of the proposed changes to be discussed and do it in a purely TiddlyWiki fashion instead of through GitHub. And then there could be somebody who is in charge of migrating those pull requests to GitHub, I guess. I think that's what he was going to say anyway, but he dropped out. So, see. Oh yes, and also what I would like to do, and what I just started looking at a tiny bit, is since the way the Federation works is just generic communication between wikis. I was wondering if we could take, to go along with the importing from Evernote that was brought up on the group, and use the same sort of import mechanism for Twitteration and moving plugins to make that a more generic, I guess, import hook, and use any sort of import for it, where instead of saying I'm going to import an SVG file or import a CSV file, whatever, you just import it, and then you would be able to more easily like convert it to JSON and stuff. I'm sorry, that was kind of jumbled, wasn't it? But I think that's mostly what we were talking about in a very condensed fashion.
sorry, I was muted just then because there was background noise. A whole.
Either I just got kicked off or everybody else did.
No, I think also Jeremy. Jeremy has some problems with the connections.
Oh, okay, well.
Hello?
Oh no! I'm still here. And now
Okay.
I'm back on the microphone too. Sorry, no, sudden interruption at this end. Cool. I guess I'd certainly one of the stuff you're talking about where you're evolving conventions. I talk about that a lot. Very interested in that. Very interested in how you've talked about using the Federation to modify the code and to modify the documentation, to collaboratively work on it. But how about using the Federation to collaboratively work on the conventions that people are going to use to communicate? So, if you think, you might want to think about that bundle of material that says things like, this is how we do hashtags, this is a well-mannered way to respond, whatever the conventions are as they emerge. This is how we indicate, yes, that we agree with the previous poster, those kinds of things. That we can, we need to assemble those. We talk a lot about the conventions that we might need, so we need to kind of write them down. We need to exchange them. We need to be able to fork them. You could imagine we are always doomed to repeat history. When the first wiki started, the C2 wiki in the 90s, it immediately spawned a community that I wasn't part of it at the time, but that I think was composed of people who are interested in agile software development, software development patterns particularly. So anyway, the principles of computer science, that sort of end of things, and there were people who are interested in wikis and discussions and so on. And the first wiki community, it didn't go entirely smoothly. I've met people whose experience of the early wiki community was that they were bruised by it, and so I wasn't part of it. And I pointed out, because you know that that's the case for all other communication media. I mean, sorry, communication media. I'm so sorry. That as far as we can tell, everything we devise that allows humans to communicate is open to this sort of abuse, if I could put it that way. And so, and we also know that the problems of collaboration amongst a really small group who like and trust each other are really easy. So when I sat down to think about Federation in TiddlyWiki 5, it's not, you know, the goal is very ambitious. It's trying to produce a way of collaborating that is better than Twitter and Facebook, because it solves one of their fundamental problems for participants, and that stems from its centralized nature. So by allowing a plurality of hosts for TiddlyWiki Federation discussions, we hope to avoid the difficulties that come with, you know, a single Facebook trying to do business in China and America, different parts of the world. Very difficult for them, puts them in a position that probably makes it almost impossible to be ethical from every perspective. So, you know, this, and that's why I'm emphasizing the convention making, because for instance, an aspect of all of this is, if I see a community that I think might be of interest, I might want to join, I need to be able to understand that kind of stuff about the community, whether, you know, the deep stuff that I might disagree with later, if you see what I mean. So the conventions, for what these conventions are for, that's, I suppose this is what I'm trying to get at. We've talked about conventions, and you were focusing rightly on this really interesting area of almost the typing conventions that we use to convey meaning within a federation. But the purpose of these conventions, I think, goes straight to our motivation in pursuing federation, which is to produce a decentralized discussion system that makes it impossible for people to have the kind of terrible experiences that some people have had on the centralized systems.
Yes. Well, I have to keep reminding myself that you and, you know, just people in general who are not me have not actually heard my conversations with Felicity. But yes, actually, most of my what I have been doing since the last Hangout has been bouncing ideas off of Felicity for exactly that sort of thing, where we want to do exactly what Twitter has not done in its, you know, access control and all of that. Because I don't know how much you have followed that specifically, but from what I can see, Twitter has been a perfect model of how to not allow trolling to happen. And but yes, that's
prevent it, you mean, or
yeah, how to prevent it, or how to allow people to control their own access and people's access to.
Oh, okay. So you mean that they're quite good at dealing with abuse?
Oh no, they're not.
The opposite. Yes, that's what I thought you meant.
Exactly the opposite.
Yes.
Like, Twitter's, you know, alerting you when somebody had blocked you was one of the shining examples of how to not run a.
Yes, absolutely.
So yes, actually, I have been very terrible about documenting the things that I've been trying to work through with this, but yeah, that's actually right now what I want to do, is get the minimum working connection between wikis, just so that I can get, you know, some group of people together to start talking to each other using it, so we can, you know, I guess formally describe these things.
Well, you're going to go racing, I know, into all the other things that we'll want. We'll want to be able to subscribe to a single place for updates from a bunch of people, because that's so the RSS community has this ping servers that aggregate updates from lots of different places. We're going to want to be able to bake the results of Federation into a static file, which goes back to that sort of Travis CI stuff. So one could imagine arranging a trigger so that whenever these 12 TiddlyWikis is updated, that we automatically run the federation mix and merge and then save out the result, so it's available to people to to see a snapshot of the conversation without having to run the federation code themselves because of the bandwidth implications. Last week we talked a bit about how in Federation it should be the norm to transfer the wikified content rather than the underlying wiki text. Have you had a chance to verify? And I was airily saying it's terribly easy to do that, don't worry, there's easy APIs. Have you had a chance to have a look at that?
No, actually I have done probably an hour's worth of looking at code since the last Hangout.
Oh, sorry, you said, yes.
Yeah. But it is from looking at the raw markup and wikified markup that I did from a while ago for the Twitter integration thing. That actually is should be simple to do, to take the tiddlers that you want to do, put them in the like wikified tiddler template, or I don't remember what it was called, something like that.
Yeah.
And then the JSON object that is actually put into the post message would be whatever the output of that is. And or if you don't trust that, then after it's sent, when you make the tiddler on your own wiki, put it through that. Although I guess that is quite a bit more dangerous since you have to actually render it for that to happen. But yes, like as it is, everything is put in when the tiddler is made on the local wiki. It is made as a plain text tiddler unless it is the origin is specifically listed as a trusted source. And right now, only the twitteration.tiddlyspot.com is listed as a trusted source because I haven't made anything to change that yet.
So hang on, so that a client setting or a server setting, so to speak, what the trusted sources are? Anybody gets
that is a client setting. Everything there is.
And so when I federate content from a trusted source, I get the raw wiki text. When I federate content from an untrusted source, I get.
Right now, you get raw wiki text put into a plain text tiddler.
Yeah.
So it's displayed as raw text from both places.
I see.
The way that it is currently set, you can do other things if you want from trusted sources. Like there are, I guess, I have not actually discussed at all how the code works. What I did is for the browser messaging, I took exactly what was used for the node plugin library, changed what can be put into the post message part of it, and then used the window.eventListener function, or add event listener function for your message, and added more cases to that. There is a GET response, which I'm assuming is something used by HTTP. I really need to look into that so I can make this more general. But and I added just 2 other cases to it for bundle request and deliver bundle. And like they take the post message JSON object that's received, check where it is from, and then it will come with a suggested function to use to unpack or to deal with the received information. And if it's from a trusted source, then we'll actually trust whatever that is. Otherwise, it just makes a plain text tiddler using the bundle content. So those bundle functions are defined in another file. I made the same way that deserializers and things are registered, I think. There's a tw.wiki.bundlehandler and tw.wiki.bundlefunction object created, and it looks in, and those are where the functions for both creating and unpacking, or not unpacking, handling the received information are stored. So in there is where everything happens, and you can add new ones without editing the plugin at all by adding to that object. And so I'm trying to make this very flexible, and what I would like is to go through this again now that I actually know how it's done, and just make it so that the plugin handlers also uses this, so it's a more general
Well, I mean, here's my way thinking about. One of the goals is to try and we want to make progress on this, and we want it to be fun for you, and we also want to get it into the core so that everybody can use it. I think that some of that is easier than other bits for you. So the two bits that you're addressing right now that are very doable by you is working with prospective users, getting feedback from them, and improving the user experience. So I really like the fact that you're not doing this as an abstract development, starting with figuring out what JavaScript classes you need. You've got very quickly to the point where somebody else can use it, and you're reacting to their feedback the best possible way to do development, and then you're starting to invent the sort of internal protocols and mechanisms necessary to get the job done. In order to get it into the core, there's going to be some other considerations which are about how this stuff fits in with everything else that we've already got. In a way, I think that's the least important set of concerns. So we talked extensively about reusing plugins, or at least building on plugins to get what you're calling bundles that currently have a format that's brittle. So that's an example of a kind of an integration concern. But you see, they're easy because I can throw integration concerns at you incredibly easily because I've had lots of practice at having to think about how to integrate new stuff into TiddlyWiki. So it kind of feels as though those first few steps, in order for you to get the best out of them and for them to be the most fun, I think you should be very relaxed about how it integrates. So I like the fact that you learned how to do a mechanism like the TiddlyWiki serializers where these things are plug-in modules. So you got to understand by doing that, and perhaps it was for the first time, got to understand both sides of this sort of fundamental mechanism that the core reuses for extensibility from plugins. So it's important that you understand that in a kind of experimental way. But as I said, the idea that you should so in terms of the code modifications that you're talking about now, I want to integrate that HTTP handling that we've got with this post message handling, make that extensible in a similar way. So there starts to be a whole bundle of other concerns there that I don't have all of those concerns, you don't have all those concerns, because there's other people that have raised, in that particular case, the desire to use TiddlyWiki as an Express.js module, which is one of the drivers for doing that separation. So, hope all of that makes sense, but I'm encouraging you to stay in this experimental mode. That the most important thing for me about the development that you're doing is that you're doing it in lockstep with users like Matt, who's, Matt's been working with you before it's functional. When you get to the point where there's a really easy to distribute edition that's got simple instructions that anybody can follow to try it themselves, and then maybe we will do hangouts and things to try getting large numbers of people federating at the same time. That's, I think, the way that we'll make really good progress. That just focusing on listening to what people want, implementing it, figuring out how we can efficiently make the thing go, and then kind of let me worry a bit about the integration stuff. And but I don't think we're there yet. I think so. It would be a shame to constrain what you're doing at the moment by anything that's in the core at the moment.
Well, as far as that goes, if you do have time, I put everything, or I guess the newest version is not there, but it's up on the GitHub. I made a GitHub repo for this.
I'm just going there now.
And there is the only thing I needed to change from the core was browser messaging.js, and I did actually very little in there in terms of any sort of fundamental changes, or there are no fundamental changes really, I guess. I added a close iframe function, which...
So which repo to look at?
I think it's, Twitteration? Let's see. In my sock, it's T5-Twitteration.
Oh, okay, but it doesn't look like it's a fork of...
Can you post
No, it's not. It is just the plugin.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yes, right now this is just there are 3 plugins, and there's a link to it in the sidebar. But yes, if you could look at, I mean, when you have time to actually go through it now, I don't think there's enough, but browsermessaging.js, which is in the Federation core, and then core.
Federation core.
And that is the only part from the TiddlyWiki core itself that has been modified for any of this.
Okay, so I'm pasting that into the browser messaging file that I've got locally so that my Git client will conveniently show me the differences. And ding, close iframe. Yeah, so that you I remember you did touch on this yesterday. The ability, lacking the ability to close an iframe. And
I'm not sure if that does everything that's required to make it do it cleanly, but it does it enough so that you can request multiple things from the same wiki without anything breaking. So it'll open.
So if I request multiple things from the same wiki, do you reload the iframe multiple times?
Yes, that's one of the ways it is not done cleanly. Like, it opens it up, sends a single request, that request is handled, the iframe is closed.
Okay. So, I mean, if you want me to bore you, we are going to need a kind of higher level conception of an iframe, you know, a thing that we manage, like we manage modals. And I can't quite remember how much of that I'd put in the current implementation, but yeah, we're not. Ouchie, ouchie.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So yes, messy dealing with iframes, isn't it?
Exactly. But anyway, the upshot of all that is that I don't think that I have done that much in this that would be, I've tried to move everything outside of this into the actual functions that are used to bundle and unbundle the tiddlers, which are handled by the local wikis every time. Like, there's nothing that a wiki does that is determined by an external wiki other than it gives it a requested filter and function to bundle the tiddlers. But the function itself is stored on the local wiki and all of that. Nothing is demanded, I suppose.
Yes. I think that you're nicely structuring this for the situation that you're in terms of not wanting to make, you know, it's easiest to do this kind of experimental development that you're doing by resting as lightly as possible on the core. When we come to fold this stuff in, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be spread all over the place. Because there are, you know, there are things that we need to do in Federation that are so damn attractive that we'll need to apply them to other use cases as well. Things like, you know, diffing, for instance. We've not explicitly talked about it, but but it's a brain dead thing to do because there's, well, in fact, the hardest thing is the fun afternoon of choosing which JavaScript library to integrate to do it, and sort of how deeply into Wikitext we make differencing be. Because, yeah, lots of interesting side distractions we could go down with that. Yes, I can't quite think what else I was trying to get to.
Okay. But so yeah, so there's that, and like, something that I do not think I have expressed well enough to anyone, since nobody has yet had the time to actually dig through the code, is it, like, actually in a discussion with Matt earlier, he was asking, like, why don't we just send JSON back and forth when we do just send JSON back and forth, and the contents of that are completely, the way that the wikis handle it is done completely separately from the base mechanism of how this works. And so without changing any of what I have done, you could make it so that you can request a bundle, which we really need a better name for that.
But this is why I'm pushing this HTTP similarity. What you're describing is HTTP, the interface that we're using. This is one way of thinking about what TiddlyWiki does, is this idea that we reuse the browser as a virtual machine, with the same JavaScript code on the server running in the virtual machine. everything that was purposefully designed about HTTP perfectly fits this use case as well. HTTP is about different representations, requesting and manipulating different representations. We have exactly that thing where we've got Wikitext representations of tiddlers, rendered representations. The routing, everything. By routing, I mean defining all the URLs that you support and saying what you get at the end of them. So somebody publishing information via federation, they would define a routing table that defines all the URLs that they respond to. We'd also use the routing table for when you're saving the wiki to static files. So the routing table would define all the files that you see in TiddlyWiki.com, give you the instructions both for serving them over HTTP and for saving them to the file system. So I'm really encouraged by spotting the same thing that you spotted, that basically what post message gives you is almost identical to HTTP with the same, but lots of the tools we use hide what HTTP is and how it does it and all that kind of thing. But they're basically incredibly similar. And there is this wonderful opportunity, therefore, partly, if we explain what's going on in terms of HTTP, we don't need to invent so much language, Having to invent bundle and so on. One of the things that I don't like about that is there's enough new concepts for people that we genuinely do have to introduce, that makes it very unattractive to have to also labor them with a concept that's a duplicate of something they already understand. Anyway, Eric is here. Eric has said that he's sleepy, so I'm going to encourage him to introduce himself through his sleepiness, and then I have a mechanism for waking him up. Eric, are you...
Yawn, snore, snore.
Good morning.
Good morning. I was up until very, very wee hours of the morning, and then I got a few hours sleep. Good morning. This is Eric. I'm here in Silicon Valley, and I'm sleepy.
And Eric is the inventor of Tiddly Tools and soon to be Tiddly Book. Eric contacted me earlier to share with me something that he'd done that I think is pretty cool. So I'm going to demo it for you because I think it might be easier for me to screen share. And here it is.
I'm good for screen sharing myself, so I could try that.
You could do it.
Let me see if I can get myself set up for a nice share here on this. I'm going to
set up. So
what you're seeing was specifically crafted to demo it to you. But go ahead, because what I have is actually more involved than that because I have it in another place.
So maybe this would be a simple way in. So Eric sent me an HTML file with a couple of tiddlers in. I dragged them into TiddlyWiki.com, and then this chevron appeared here. When I hover over it, I get a slide-in table of contents. Like tiddlers from it, move away for it to slide away. If I click on the chevron, then it stays there, even if I click elsewhere. There's also a chevron at the top that gives us access to some funky search capability of Eric's. And yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. Oh, that one doesn't disappear on hover.
No, that one goes behind on hover because if you lock it in place, it falls behind the tiddlers. It's supposed to, at least. Oh no, maybe I didn't set it that way on the one I distributed to you.
Yeah, no, mine's a few hours old. You probably
yes.
done loads of changes.
Pop down the tools options on that go-to there.
Wow.
Okay, so you have choices. You can go and search through all the shadows. It's busy filling in the lists as you're clicking that, so it's taking a little bit of time because now you have 2,200 tiddlers in that list. But yes, you can. It's a very compact searcher, but it's also a go-to.
Very nice.
Okay. Also, if you close your sidebar to get yourself some more room on your page, you can still see the chevron on the right-hand side in the middle, which is a slide-out version of the sidebar.
Ah.
By the way, I'm calling these things slide bars.
That is truly hilarious.
Okay, now, the thing about slide bars is it's not just this top left and side ones here. You can place a slide bar anywhere you want. You can define as many of them as you want. And yeah, so I have one where I put 8 of them.
Sounds like we should fix
all 4 corners, all 4 sides.
Go on then. Do you want to demo us that?
Oh, sure, why not? Let me demo it. How do I do this now? Screen share.
So Matt's just said in the sidebar, or slide bar.
Yes.
Those tools look very useful, Eric. So we need to encourage Eric to be publishing a Tiddly Tools plugin library.
Okay, you can see my screen here now, yes?
Mm.
Okay, so what we have here is my current version of the empty Tiddly book. And of course it does have on the left the table of contents. It also has it on the right as well. And it also has it on the top or on the bottom. Now if I come over here, it also has toolbar buttons that slide out. And so, for instance, if I come over here and I say, you know what, unlock this document, now it's unlocked and there's additional editing functions here. But when it's unlocked, this is the go-to box and this is the author tools box. These on the sides are still the table of contents. And yes, you can lock it in place. And when you lock it in place, see, now it does the fall back behind thing that I was telling you about.
I see.
So this one falls behind so it doesn't obscure your content while you're working. The one on the bottom, when it locks in place, it just stays on top until you unlock it. You can, of course, these buttons on the side that pop out, you can lock them in place as well. And then, of course, you can lock the sidebars in place and turn off the editing. And so there you have sidebars everywhere. Slide bars everywhere. Unlock it, pop this down, lock it into place, bring up the list, pick something. Basically, there you go. Slide bars.
That's
and go-to.
quite a tour de force. And so the go-to is the same go-to that you showed me before with that.
No, it's completely rewritten. Okay, the coolest part about go-to uses something I call combo box. Combo box is a combination of an edit field and a list box, but it's editable.
Amazing.
And it's all built using wiki text. There's no code in here.
Even more amazing.
Okay, but with the combo box, that's what's giving you this edit field with a selectable thing. And if you start to type, you have an OK cancel. And if you give it a configuration that doesn't have any list content, you could use this as an input field with an OK cancel. And what you do is you give it a temporary target for what you're writing into, but then when you hit the OK button, it writes it to your real target.
Useful.
So, yeah.
I'm looking behind at the source code there.
For the combo box?
Yeah, how many macros, how many things have you got tagged macro?
I just clicked the wrong thing. How many things do I have tags as tagged macro?
Yeah, so how many?
There you go. Let's see.
Okay.
Favorites, combo box, link box, modal, more, notify. Oh, more is an interesting one. Can
you go back to? So sorry. Can you go back, showing us your clever?
Yes, I'll use my back button to do that.
Jolly good. You've got some interesting conventions here for how to self-document a macro. Would you like to show us inside this one?
Oh, how does this look?
That's exactly what I mean. Yeah.
Okay, let's just go into edit mode. And okay, so I started off with I have some macros that are useful for this tiddler. Show result.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then this is sort of following the pattern of the old TiddlyWiki classic of having a table at the top. I liked the look, I kept the look. And then I've got my documentation, I've got some about stuff and some usage stuff and it's all just wiki text formatting. And then under examples, here I have examples, and I'm invoking them. And so I quote the example first, and then I invoke it. So I quote the example first, and then I invoke it. And so there's the entire documentation, which when rendered gives you the table, the about, the usage, and then the examples list all non-system tiddlers. So here's a list of all non-system tiddlers. List selected tiddlers. So it has a tiddler and a field and a list filter. So it's only the ones that are prefixed. Search all tiddlers, including shadows, with an auto pop-up list box, store the results, and blah, blah, blah. So yeah. And as a matter of fact, these are all broken because the parameter called list was changed to be filter. So these examples aren't working properly.
Which is the most complex of the macros that you've got going? You're using.
Oh well, okay. I have an enhanced table of contents macro. This table of contents macro over here. As a matter of fact, let me show it over here. Let me just actually I'll bring up the side here. This table of contents macro. Let me collapse this. So here's the table of contents macro, and if I start navigating around, we see that it automatically highlights the correct one. But if I pick some topic that's down deep in the tree, it opens the tree automatically to that branch. So it has a auto open, find the right branch kind of thing going on based on current tiddler, which is tracked in the history list. And so as you navigate here, it'll navigate there, and as you navigate there, it'll navigate here. Even if that branch of the tree was closed, for instance, if I mark terms of use as a favorite, and then I go back to the home page, and then I pop down my list of favorites, and I choose terms of use, it opens the tree to where it needs to be. So that's one of my more complicated ones. If I go over to the parts list, let's see what other.
And that's not a pure. That's got some JavaScript in it.
No. Oh well, the scrolling to force it to scroll into location has JavaScript in it.
Yeah.
This part of it does not have any JavaScript. There's no extended filters or anything. It's just using the value from history list bang bang current tiddler.
Right, but the opening of the parents to make sure that it's visible.
Oh no. No, the opening of the tree, every time you navigate, the tree is redrawn to the correct branch. So there's no JavaScript there. It's just a refresh event. It's based off of current tiddler in the history list.
Yes, but how now when it's rendering does it know that appendix should be open?
Okay, the current tiddler is parts list, and in my table of contents macro, this might be going too deep for the conversation here, but in my table of contents macro, here's my fully expandable tree, collapsible tree. But then there's a bit of it here which calls on show if parent. And so this is this is powerful recursion. You can't do arithmetic in your language, but you can do recursion. And so here's this recursion which is saying find the parent branch that the current tiddler is in, so that we know whether to open it or not.
Okay.
So I have logic which says show all the branches you want to show, but then there's one which says if the branch is not open, but if it is the parent, then show it anyway. And it says show if parent, and it says, well, what tiddler are you looking for? The current tiddler. And so this logic here says walk up the parent tag branches and find looking for the tiddler that you want to know whether that branch should be open for. So for instance, when I'm trying to render the appendix branch, I take the current tiddler and I search upwards and I say, do I find appendix? If I do, then I open the branch.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
And there's one more macro I'd like to show you before I stop this little thing here. Which
just before you do, Jeremy, there is a not correct visitor, so to say.
Yeah, I'll check.
Oh, hi, dear. Yes, indeed. Okay, so here's something that was requested a while ago. Somebody said, how can I have a filter but have it do a progressive reveal of a more and less type of functionality? Because he had said, I have 1,000 results in my filter and I want to page them. So I wrote a macro called more, which takes a filter and some restrictions.
No, and this does require some JavaScript.
No, it does not. All of this is written in wiki text. Okay, so for example, so here I say here's an example: more all tiddlers, and show them as comma separated or as plain text, etc. And let's take a look at the syntax for this more macro because it's also a very powerful recursion. Oh, sorry, this is the info tiddler. Oops. Let me go back to the parts list, and where's macros more? Here we go. Okay, here's the code. Oops. Okay, there's the code. And so this is the entire logic here. And that does a more with the next and previous links.
Gosh, that's interesting.
So I'm really having a lot of fun playing around with recursion in wiki text.
And so there are two forms of recursion in Wikitext. There's recursion of macros and there's recursion of transclusions. And here, obviously, we've got recursion of macros. One issue at the moment is that although we do detect loops when you do recursive transclusion, we don't detect loops when you recursively render macros. And so I think your code here would have the same, would it?
No. These have proper.
No, this one doesn't. Is safe actually. But the current TOC, I believe the current TOC macro still gets its knickers in a twist.
Well, I've solved that problem actually. There's a coding technique I'm using there. Basically, as you walk down the tree, you need to accumulate a list of the nodes you've visited, so you don't try to revisit them.
How do you accumulate it?
Well, because it's recursing, what I have is at the entry of the function, I pass in an empty list of excluded tiddlers. And then at each level, as I'm rendering that branch of the tree, I know that name of that tiddler, and so I add that to the list of excluded ones as I recurse downward. Yeah. So that every level I'm tacking on, and what I do is I add it as with the syntax of minus bracket bracket name of tiddler bracket bracket. So it's in fact a subtractive filter is what I'm adding. And so the exclude variable contains a bunch of subtractions of all the tiddlers that are in the path above it. And so regardless of what the path below it is, anything that's in the exclude list will not be revisited. So it prevents looping, regardless of where you are in any branch. Currently, the talk that you have does check for root tag, and it eliminates root tag, but it doesn't eliminate any internal parent tags.
Yeah.
Okay, so the technique you're using to say minus root tag, all I did was take that, make it a variable, and then keep tacking on additional tiddlers to subtract to prune the list.
You should. Eric Schulman, you should totally send a pull request for that because just recently we had somebody posting that they'd run into that. It was very confusing and bad for them.
Well, what I'm thinking is that my table of contents macros might be a good pull request as a whole because they don't disrupt anything about the existing talk. And in fact, they can sit side by side.
Yeah, but this bug fix would be fixing something.
Yeah. Well, let me figure out how to incorporate that technique into the original talk.
Excellent.
So among the things you probably might have noticed here is that as I'm trying to show you things, I go to a thing called parts list, which is actually a bunch of filters that look for the different components I've got built and then list them all, so it becomes very easy to find out what I've done and where it is. So for instance, I've got this nice little history thing, so I can go back to any tiddler I've visited, even if I closed it. And I also have a a back button, which just flips between the last two tiddlers, which is very convenient when you're developing, because you have to often flip back between what did I do in that tiddler and what am I editing over here. I just have to show off a little bit more here. You woke me up, sorry. But if you go to the settings here, you have a lot of things you can manipulate, including things like just the size of the topic text. Or let's say you have a sidebar open here, and let's say you're an old person with bad eyesight, and you'd like your left slide bar to be a lot bigger. Of course, the right slide bar can still be as small as you need it to be, but so you can adjust all the fonts. There's color pickers here. So for example, if I change the slide bar frame to a nice wood tone, or maybe some other sort of texture, so I can change the colors there. And even using the combo box, I have a list of X11 color codes. So for instance, if I said make that aquamarine, and these are the actual, list of color codes. Gainsborough. What color is Gainsborough? Oh, some sort of off gray thing. But these are actual. I don't know what the RGBs are for this. They don't have RGBs. Well, they do, but you have to look them up. But these are actual CSS color values. Indian red. There you go. Make it Indian red. So textures, patterns, half shadings, so you can make things semi-transparent. And yeah, lots of other features in here, but
well, I think
I could go on forever, but I'm not going to. So I'm done for now.
I think we've done a pretty good job of helping you to wake up on.
Where's the stop sharing button?
Thursday morning. You've stopped. You stopped sharing, or
I did
somehow. Well, I don't know. I'm not seeing you sharing anymore.
Well, good. Okay. Well, now that's done.
I'm not sure how that happened.
Oh, I think I do, but it's okay.
Well, it was intentional.
Anyway, so my plan, just to finish up this little bit here, my plan is that I need to talk to you, Jeremy, to discuss standards for naming and things before I publish, because I don't want to publish and have something where I've chosen my own convention for how to structure things that doesn't echo the proper TiddlyWiki way of doing things.
Are you talking about for the core submissions, or just for publishing?
Partly for that, but also just for my own stuff here. Because, like, for instance, one of the things I haven't done is that all my TiddlyTools stuff is not under $:/. So they're not hidden from people.
It's very difficult. I mean, Eric, to some people, it might seem really weird what's happening here. Eric's just shown you some unbelievable stuff, and he's also telling you that it's not kind of published yet. He's not making it available yet.
Well, it is and it isn't. I have an online posted location you can get it from, but I'm not advertising it because and primarily because I'm concerned about the conventions for naming, because anything I put out, people are going to start to pick up and use, and if the names get jammed up, then did I just hang?
No,
it sounds to me too with TiddlyWiki that the second you put something out there, it will get adopted and copied, and so you want to make sure that you get that first thing right. I think I don't know, Eric. My concern at the moment is that you've got so much stuff that really needs to get out there. That I guess I'd be just thinking about it from the point of view of what's the easiest, what's the path of least resistance?
Well, the path of least resistance is that it's all technically available already. Okay, because if you go to the inside TiddlyWiki, the inside TW under my GitHub pages, the address. All of the stuff that I've built is there, all of it, and so it's in use. So
Yeah, and it's
so
very
the real decision is if I'm not going to concern myself with establishing alternative naming conventions and such, then all I need to do is just announce what I've got that's already posted and let the chips fall where they may. My concern would be about later on when I realize that I've made a major error in my naming convention and I decide to refactor all of my tiddlers to rename them, and suddenly I'm dealing with the leftovers of people using the old versions and colliding because now there's different names to things.
Well, why not? I mean, the naming convention thing is of all the possible things that you might have mentioned, might have raised. It's probably the easiest to discuss because you've got all the relevant names laid out quite nicely. So maybe we should make time for that discussion, and you could either post about it or perhaps we'll grab each other on Skype in the meantime.
Indeed. The like for instance, the main thing there is, do things have to go under $:/? Do they have to? Should they?
I think they should.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of system tiddlers, and I think you will have more trouble if they are visible than you have if they are system.
Mm.
One curious knock-on effect of renaming those to add that prefix is that there are certain things which may not be found by filters unless I tweak the filter to say look in the system as well. So if I do a wholesale renaming of everything that I've got, then I've got to go and sort of debug and dig through to make sure I didn't break the filter.
More robust.
If you're doing that, you should be aware that if you moved your stuff into a plugin, that you would have the same problem with respect to shadow tiddlers not
exactly
being to the same filter.
Exactly.
So it may be worth deferring changing it until you make things into a plugin. So one way of doing it might be to say, here's an alpha of TiddlyTools 5. It's an alpha because things aren't structured as plugins, therefore you're not going to get upgrades, therefore it's at your own risk. But pay attention, and there will be upgradable plugins coming soon. The first plugins that I do will be determined by user demand. Let me know what you think. And donations, determined by donations.
There you go, donations. Pay me, I'll fix it. Yeah. I could do something like that. But basically, I am on the verge of having too many things not published to not take that as the next high priority thing to do, is to just get this out there where people can start.
Yeah, and if you say it's alpha, it may, or you can be sure that it will change.
Maybe I should have some sort of a check this agreement box that you agree to discard the alphas when I change things, and you promise to keep your stuff up to date and not to hassle me about old stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the solution, is just make people promise not to bother me.
But you know how we're still getting. I find it's one of the most interesting. Well, not one of the most. It's one of several very interesting things that's relatively unique to TiddlyWiki. This longevity thing, and there was a review this week from a journalist who picked up TiddlyWiki after 7 years and was pleasantly surprised to find the wiki that they'd created in 2009 worked absolutely fine, and that is.
You don't try to save.
Yes, but at least the information is salvageable, and at least even a layman would be able to salvage the information without needing any special skills. Sorry, now I got confused why I brought that up. Sorry. What did you mention before that, Eric?
I don't recall.
Never mind. We're getting close to the about your alphas and turning your stuff into plugins, and then please turning it into a TiddlyTools plugin library. We should say hello to Scott. Scott, hi. Would you like to say hello and introduce yourself? Hopefully, I've added you to the broadcast.
Hi everyone. I'm a bit late. Am I mic'd?
You are mic'd. We can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Just popping in for a few minutes. I have to run a bit today, but I didn't want to miss out. There was so much going on. I'll definitely loop back and pick up Eric's demo. I think seem to have come in right after the most exciting bit of
You've come in
the
right
Hangout.
at the end. In fact, we started an hour earlier than we
That's right.
typically have. So I'm just about to wrap up. Matt was asking in the sidebar about the release roadmap. I want to do releases that focus on the big tasks identified in the Finishing TiddlyWiki 5 material. So that means the first update that I want to do is the one that we've been talking about with Mario, or well, talking about with everybody, but particularly Mario picked up to take a lead on, which is reconfiguring the way that we build TiddlyWiki.com so that the different sites within it are stored within separate repositories on GitHub with different permissions. The goal will be to make it easier for translators to produce the French and German, etc., translations of TiddlyWiki.com, but also to make it easier for a group of people to make content updates for the main English TiddlyWiki.com and then to push those updates to TiddlyWiki.com. So that will be 5.1.12 unless something else gets in the way. And then I'd like to turn my attention to improving the support for third-party plugin libraries. So this is making it easy for me to decide whether to install the plugin from tiddlytools.com, making it easy for me to choose whether to then automatically retrieve updates from tiddlytools.com, and probably have a button that you press to go and manually check. So those would be the first two releases. Not very ambitious, but my hope is while that not very ambitious stuff is going on, we would also kick off pull requests for the more ambitious things. So, for instance, Federation. It may be that for some time Jed will be the community, but Jed in particular will be experimenting with techniques and so on. But even as his experimentation proceeds, it may be possible for him and others to work together to start building the pull request just sort of behind his footsteps, so to speak. So we'll see, but that would be the hope, is that we're going to parallelize things this year, and you can see how both of those first steps are towards that. Making it possible for other people to push through content updates will hopefully keep the community running at a hotter temperature. For the first time, it'll mean that on any given day, visiting tiddlywiki.com is likely to give you something new and interesting, so you should go there. And it's starting, we'll go on to automatically pushing federated content to tiddlywiki.com, so that when Matt writes a new essay on twaddle, that a suitable link will appear on tiddlywiki.com automatically. So it's not unambitious what I want to do under that banner, but to get started is very simple. And as I mentioned before, there's sort of fairly clear midterm goal of making it so that Mario can make an update to tiddlywiki.com in response to a message on the Google group and reply on the Google group with a link to tiddlywiki.com, so that it's as quick. And then beyond that, I think our problem with releases is to avoid what happened last year, where we had a 6-month period with no release. That's not healthy, not good. And in order to avoid that, we may need to start dealing with branches and pull requests a bit differently. We may need to, because some of the reason why we had such a long gap was kind of artifacts of the way that I'm developing TiddlyWiki, and we should fix those. Okay. I think I'm going to draw to a close now. So I think, just looking in the chat line. Okay. Yeah. Before we go, I'm going to be going to be muting Mario because I think, yes, sorry, Mario, I was getting an echo from you. This discussion is going to continue after I've gone. If you're watching this in the future and you find it frustrating that you won't know what the others are discussing, then you must encourage the idea of an after hangout that is recorded. But for reasons that we discussed last week, with me leaving, I'm going to stop this recording. But as I say, the most of the other people will stick around. Okay, so we'll have another hangout hopefully in the next week or so. I'll try and get the date out a bit quicker than I did manage this week. Thanks again, everybody who joined me today. So Eric, Jed, Mario, Matt, and Scott, thank you very much. Much appreciate your time. As ever, these things are never quite long enough for all the things that we'd like to have discussed. So my apologies to everybody who left with a thought still lodged in their head. But hopefully, well, that's why we'll have more Hangouts, is to continue the discussions. So thank you very much, everybody. And let's wave goodbye to everybody as we say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.